In this video, I want to drill down into the following points. Number one, why I see myself as an amateur. Number two, the advantages of being an amateur, that is embracing being an amateur. Number three, think like an amateur. And lastly, the pitfalls of amateurism, that is the lack of acknowledging your ignorance. A couple of years back, I wrote an article titled, I Suck at My Job and That's Okay. I'll leave a link to that in the description below, and remember to smash the like button while you're down there. I was at the beginning of my career path as a computer networks engineer when I wrote that article, and here I am a few years later and I still suck. Let me explain what I mean by that. I don't really suck because I wouldn't be in my job if that had been the case. I've got a few years of experience now and I'm at a senior level. Being in the job meant that I was a bit like a baby. I still had to master the basics of the job like a baby would have to learn to walk and talk. Now those basics are second nature to me. I can't really give examples of some of the basics I had to learn in the job without getting too technical, but I'm sure you get my point here. And sticking with that baby analogy, early on in the job, most of the things were new to me, so I would soak it all in like a sponge. My learning curve was pretty steep though. If I were to graph my rate of learning, it would have looked something like this, like this graph here. But much like a sponge, the rate of absorption does drop after a while of doing the same thing. So after having been in the role for a long time, my rate of learning would level out. Well, at least that's what I thought at that time. I thought that the early days when you're learning new and exciting stuff are the fun days. I used to think that with more experience, you reach that stagnant rate of learning where you feel you know it all and you stop learning. And boy, was I wrong. Your learning will only level out if you choose to. My skills in my job are much advanced now, but I'm miles away from being the top expert in the field. And I'm not talking about pay grade here. I'm talking about knowledge and skill set. So recognizing this has taught me to be humble, patient, and keep learning constantly. It never slows down. It's made me see that I'm an amateur. I've had to embrace that. And before I explain that, just to warn you, I'm going to hit you with a lot of quotes in this video from so many great people, dead and alive. So straight away, let's go straight to it, which leads me to our first quote and point number one. Embrace being an amateur. That's all any of us are, amateurs. We don't live long enough to be anything else. I first come across this quote in the book Show Your Work by Austin Kleon, where he's got a whole chapter dedicated to the subject of being an amateur. You may not necessarily agree that you're an amateur if you are someone who's a true veteran in your field, but there's something special about being an amateur and thinking like one. The idea of being an amateur itself is just accepting that we are constantly learning, and thinking like one has its advantages actually. When you are a beginner at something, you've got a certain way of thinking and doing things which may not necessarily be the custom in your surrounding or your field of work. You approach your work using unconventional methods because you've got little to lose. So you're willing to try anything, you're willing to take chances, experiment, and be more creative in the process. Sometimes in the process of doing things in an unprofessional way, you make new discoveries. Another quote in the Show Your Work book goes something like this. In the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities, but in the experts, there are few. And the quote is by Shunryu Suzuki. As I mentioned earlier, as a newbie, it's something you're willing to try anything. You're willing to take chances, experiment, and be creative in the process. But for some reason, the longer you've been doing the same thing, you become more experienced. That thought process fades away. When you've been doing your job for such a long time and are highly experienced, you reach a point when it's all second nature, which is good, but then you stop thinking creatively sometimes. This is the point where you actually need to challenge yourself and advance further. Build on top of the knowledge you already have. When I first started working, I worked with some guys with decades of experience. I still do right now. I would notice how they could recall a lot of information, which for me would require referring to notes. And I would constantly write things down. Everything new that I learned, I had to write it down. I also noticed that the more experienced guys never took notes. They just relied on memory. For me though, that note-taking process I picked up as an amateur, as a newbie in the job, is something I've stuck with till this day, because I know the benefits of writing things down, which is something I can talk about in another video. Of course, the advantage of being a veteran, a professional, having lots of experience in your field is that you then pick up things quicker. As you become more familiar with the subject, you grasp new concepts in that subject area much quicker. The learning never slows down, it never does, but what changes is your learning ability. Now, the trouble with amateurs sometimes comes when they think they know everything. When someone gets exposed to a particular subject and gets to know a bit about it, and then suddenly they think they know it all. Neil deGrasse Tyson puts it well in a quote: "A great challenge of life, knowing enough to think you're right, but not knowing enough to know you're wrong." The challenge here is to acknowledge ignorance. Once you accept that your knowledge is limited, you then appreciate that you have to keep learning and learn endlessly. Another beautiful quote. I'll keep going. Are you still counting how many quotes we're on right now? This one is by Mahatma Gandhi. It goes, "Live as if you were to die tomorrow. Learn as if you were to live forever." You have to keep learning, keep practicing, keep getting better at it. There's always room for improvement. If you're an artist, keep working on your brush strokes. In sports, keep hitting the ball harder and training. Learning is an ongoing process. The mistake that a lot of people make is that they set goals, and when they achieve those goals, they stop. But getting better is something continuous. You find people who set a goal to lose 10 kgs of weight, for example, and once they reach that goal of losing that weight, they go back to their old ways of living an unhealthy life. Do all these things to better yourself for the rest of your life. I've accepted that learning takes time and patience, because our human brain can be that snag in the learning process, because it's got a low threshold on the information it can take in at any given time. It's a bit like trying to fill up a glass with fizzy Coke quicker than the foam can build up. It's impossible. You have to pause ever so often to let the foam settle and then add more, or just point slowly and gently. You get my analogy. Learning is the same. Learn, pause, and process it, and then take some more in. I think what also helps the learning process sometimes is taking on big tasks. So if your manager or your boss, supervisor, lecturer gives you options of work to pick from, I'll say pick the hard tasks. Those kind of tasks, they give you a chance to research new topics. I won't lie though, when I do those kind of things, it seems very complicated at the beginning, and I find myself biting my jaw and bashing on the table. But lo and behold, there's that aha moment when it all clicks. And that's the most exhilarating feeling. That's what drives me, and now will drive you to keep learning. I look at my colleagues with decades of experience in their jobs and other pros in sports and fitness. That for me is a reminder that patience really is a virtue. It's taken those guys several years to get where they are. So keep on working on your craft and be patient and be persistent. As some wise person I've never met once said, geniuses aren't born, they are made. My challenge to you is that you make learning an everyday part of your life. Set time every day to read a book, maybe subscribe to a learning platform online, Udemy, Skillshare, you name it. Make mistakes and learn from those. Ask questions. Ask Google. Google stuff online, research, and just keep learning. That's it for now. Thank you for watching. Peace out.